Welcome to Revenge Report. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let's dive in. The moment my father's voice echoed through the hall, I knew something was about to break. He stood up, front row, in full suit, polished and poised like always, and said, "Rebecca, you need to move on. Greg wouldn't want this to drag you down." The air in the National Bureau Honors Hall went still. I froze at the podium, mid-sentence, one hand gripping Greg's folded flag, the other still on the mic. Eyes turned. Some widened. A few dropped. "My name is Rebecca Langley. I'm 39. I live in Richmond, Virginia. I'm a senior investigator with the state's Bureau of Internal Oversight. And until recently, I believe my husband Greg died 4 years ago on a classified FBI mission overseas. His body was never recovered. They said that was normal, but nothing about this has ever been normal." Quick note, before listening, share which city or country you're watching from. I stared at my father, Judge Philip Langley, retired but still influential enough to make senators blink. My mouth tightened, but I didn't speak. He smiled like this was some courtroom stunt. Then the doors burst open. A woman, young, no more than 20, was being wheeled down the aisle. Her hospital gown hung loose on her shoulders, one arm in a sling, the other clutching a metal tag. Her face was bruised, stitched, eyes darting. Security froze. No one stopped her. She looked right at me. "Rebecca Langley?" she croaked. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but he's alive. Greg's alive." A hush collapsed over the room. The air buzzed. My knees nearly buckled. The girl held out a blood-stained dog tag. Greg's. I'd memorized every scratch on it. She whispered, "He saved me. In a black site, they were going to kill us all. He stayed behind so I could run." "What black site?" someone called out. Her hands shook. "I don't know. Underground. We were never supposed to be there. He told me to find you. He said, 'Tell Rebecca I'm still fighting.'" Someone gasped. A camera clicked. My father's jaw clenched. A few men in bureau uniforms whispered behind me. One bolted for the exit. My instincts flared. I stepped down from the podium and met the girl halfway. Her eyes locked on mine. "They're watching me now," she said low. "Be careful who you trust." I took the tag and wrapped my fingers around it like it was a lifeline. I turned toward the officials, faces pale, stiff, panic disguised as professionalism. I knew that look. I'd worn it before. Whatever this girl just dropped in our laps, it wasn't just truth, it was danger. I looked over at my father. He didn't blink, and that told me everything. The second the door shut behind us, I spun around. "You knew something," I said, eyes locked on my father. Before that girl even spoke. "You knew the private lounge was silent, except for the low buzz of overhead lights. The velvet chairs, the stocked bar, none of it softened the tension snapping through the air. My mother sat stiff on the edge of the sofa, legs crossed tight, hands folded over her lap like we were at a garden brunch. She hadn't said a word since we walked in. Dad loosened his tie. "She's delusional, Rebecca. Probably coached. You saw the state she was in? She had Greg's tag. That could have come from anywhere." I pulled it from my coat pocket and dropped it on the coffee table. I was with him the day he got that. We'd just come back from DC. He had it engraved the next morning. My mother's eyes flicked toward it. "Barely. She's unstable," Dad said again. "You saw it. Paranoia, trauma, babbling about black sites. This is exactly why the FBI never confirms details. It invites chaos." I stepped closer. "And what exactly were you whispering to those agents before they ran out the door?" He didn't flinch. "I asked for a protective detail for Katie. That girl could have been a threat. Bullshit." That hit. His mouth tightened. I kept going. "She's scared. Barely 20, dragged herself into a national memorial to deliver a message, knowing people might be watching her. She wasn't threatening anyone. She was terrified. That doesn't make her right, but it makes her real." He turned to the bar, poured a glass of scotch. "Neat, always. You're tired. You've been carrying this for years. I understand grief. You don't." That made him pause. His hand hovered over the bottle, just a second too long. Katie stepped in from the hall, quiet like she always was when things got heavy. Her hair was tied back in a loose braid, her dress shoes scuffed at the toes. She clutched her phone in both hands like it might help her stay grounded. "Mom," she said, voice small, "is Dad really alive?" I knelt in front of her. "I don't know yet, baby. But something's wrong. That much I do know. She looked down. You told me they never found his body. I did. Was that a lie? I shook my head. No, that part was true. But everything else? I'm not sure anymore. Someone's been hiding things. Katie nodded slowly. So, what happens now? I stood, looked straight at my father. Now I find out why. He stepped forward, lowering his voice. Rebecca, listen to me. You chase this ghost and you're going to burn everything. Your job, your name, your daughter's safety. You want to be the headline? Grieving widow gone rogue? Is that what Greg would want? My mother finally spoke, cold, clipped. You have a duty to your daughter. To your future, I turned on her. My duty is to the truth. My dad pointed at the dog tag on the table. You can't prove any of it. And if you push, you'll isolate everyone you care about. Is that worth it? I didn't blink. If someone buried Greg, I want to know who held the damn shovel. He exhaled hard through his nose, poured another drink. Then you're on your own, he said. Good. I grabbed my purse, checked on Katie, and opened the door. Because if Greg was still fighting, I damn sure wasn't about to stop. They moved fast after the memorial. By Monday morning, I was honorably transitioned into early retirement from the bureau. No warning, just a call, then a folder left on my desk. Quiet language, polished lies, decades of service, needed time for family, new chapter. They offered a part-time role at the State Intelligence Review Board. Advisory only. I'd teach a course on national security theory to hand-picked grad students and review low-priority policy proposals. No fieldwork, no classified access officially. I accepted it with a smile and a handshake. By the end of my first week, I had a new badge, a modest office, and access to just enough restricted portals to start poking where I wasn't supposed to. I worked the job during the day, wore blazers, answered to undersecretaries, graded papers with dead eyes. But every night when Katie was asleep, I slid into the encrypted back end of the internal review archive, one thin layer above the classified logs. The Bureau had flagged Greg's mission under Foreign Intercept Recovery, non-viable. The file looked clean. Too clean. I cross-checked the field transmission logs from that same window. One stood out. A ping, 42 hours after Greg's official time of death. Encrypted call sign, bouncing off a dead satellite. But the code matched Greg's handler line. He was alive, at least for those 42 hours. The transcript was mostly scrubbed. One word made it through the garble. Clear path. The next log was a recovery summary, light on details, heavy on signatures. I counted the pages. Page 4 was missing, not redacted, just gone. The index skipped it entirely like it had never existed. I opened the post-op supply manifest for that operation. Mostly standard gear, comm units, med packs, fuel orders, but one shipping contractor jumped out. Langley Strategies. I stared at the screen. It wasn't just the name, it was the timing. Their invoice posted 2 days after Greg's death. Routing logistics, third-party clearance. But Langley Strategies wasn't military, wasn't intelligence. It was a lobbying firm, my father's firm. I pulled up their public contract list. They'd signed a classified procurement deal with a shell subsidiary under the Department of Human Risk Resettlement, a department that technically didn't exist. The logo was a pixelated globe and a locked hand. I felt sick. I cross-checked the vendor code from the manifest against the state procurement log. Same code, same Langley. I pushed back from my desk, palms sweating. He'd buried it. Right there, under layers of paperwork and half-truths. Greg had called for help. He was alive, transmitting. And somewhere between that ping and the next protocol, he'd vanished. And the company who routed the body bag belonged to the man who raised me. I logged out, shut off the lights, and sat there in the dark office for a minute, trying to slow my breath. Then I opened a drawer, pulled out an old legal pad, and started writing. 1. Greg pinged post-death. 2. Recovery record missing a page. 3. Contractor, Langley Strategies. 4. A clear path. No more pretending this was just an error or some freak coincidence. I wasn't chasing ghosts. I was tracking men who thought they were untouchable, and one of them was my father. I went home that night and pulled Greg's laptop out of the back of my closet. It had been returned to me after the investigation closed, wiped, sealed, tagged as final effects. I never opened it. Couldn't. But now, I needed to know what the Bureau thought they'd erased. I plugged it in. The boot screen loaded slow, like it hadn't been powered up in years. The interface was familiar. Custom OS Greg had coded himself. Ugly, gray, blunt. But Greg never cared about design, just function. I ran a forensic crawl on the drive. Most of it looked clean, almost too clean. But then I noticed a folder under archived files labeled Inventory, Coastal Relief, Q3. Greg never worked Coastal Relief. I opened it. Just spreadsheets at first. Numbers, counts, supply codes. But the formatting didn't track. Dates overlapped, some columns were blank, and one row, halfway down, was just a string of ampersands. I clicked it. The screen flashed, froze, then loaded a prompt. Cipher key required. I tried Greg's badge number, then the date of our wedding. Nothing. I stopped, breathed, then typed the name of our daughter, Catherine 1012. It opened. A video file loaded. No name, no timestamp. Just gray static, then Greg's face. I swear my heart stopped. He looked rough, thin, dark circles under his eyes, beard overgrown, but he was clear, focused, alive. If you're watching this, he said, voice low but steady. I couldn't get out. I tried. They cut the line before the second extraction team came. I don't know if this will reach anyone I trust, but if it's Rebecca, you need to listen. I leaned forward, palms on my knees. This wasn't an intel operation. Not really. The shipments, they weren't weapons. They weren't aid. They were people, transferred under NGO cover. Women, kids, all undocumented, moved like cargo, and someone on the inside signed off. He paused, swallowed. I followed a route. They call it Clear Path. It's a covert corridor from offshore pickup to inland holding. These aren't prisoners. They're leverage, bargaining chips for private interests. And the only gap I found, the only name that didn't fit, was Langley Strategies. I froze. Greg looked straight into the camera. I'm not just running. I'm hiding. If I surface, I'm dead. If you dig, they'll come for you too. But I couldn't leave this buried. I couldn't be part of it. The video cut off. No glitch. Just ended. I sat there, breathing shallow, stomach tight, then dug deeper. If he hid one file, maybe there were more. I ran a hidden directory scan and found another buried link inside a dummy presentation folder labeled Water Infrastructure Review. This time, it wasn't Greg. It was grainy footage from what looked like a warehouse camera, one of those old black and white fixed angles. 5 people sat around a folding table. The audio was faint, but I caught enough. One woman said, "The offshore intake's been rerouted. All processing will go through Mira." A man in a suit asked, "Who's handling the stateside wash?" Another answered, "Judge Langley will handle cleanup like last time." I paused the video, rewound, played it again. The words didn't change. Judge Langley, not just aware, not just complicit, cleanup. Like last time. My throat went dry. I felt it in my chest, like every inch of air had been pulled out of the room. My father didn't just bury Greg's trail, he helped build the damn machine. I shut the laptop, heart pounding, fingers trembling. I stared at the wall, mind spinning, then opened my notepad and scratched in a new line under Greg's name. They trusted him to hide the bodies. I left the laptop shut and didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove 3 hours to a veterans rehab center, tucked behind a strip of dying pines in southern Maryland. No press releases, just a brick compound with a faded sign. Sable Recovery Center. The kind of place they send broken people to be forgotten. I gave a fake name at the front desk and flashed my old credentials. Still carried weight in places like this. "Who are you here to see?" the nurse asked, already typing. "Mariana Cortez. She came 2 weeks ago. Gunshot wound to the hip, multiple fractures." The woman glanced up, wary. "Family?" "No," I said, "but I'm the reason she's alive." 10 minutes later, I was escorted into a common room that smelled like disinfectant and cafeteria eggs. Mariana sat in a wheelchair near the window. Her leg was wrapped, her eyes on the trees. She didn't look surprised when I walked in. "I figured you'd come," she said softly. "They usually do." I sat across from her. "I'm not them." She didn't answer, just reached into her sweatshirt pocket and pulled out a folded scrap of paper. Edges torn, creased down the middle like it had been hidden a long time. She handed it to me without a word. It was a hand-drawn map, faded pen marks, coded notations. Labeled at the top, clear path. There were arrows, symbols, and a thick red X near what looked like a mountainous ridge. I recognized the outline. It was a stretch of off-grid terrain near the Kentucky-Tennessee border. Federal jurisdiction was gray there. Some call it a dead zone. He kept the other half, Mariana whispered. Told me if anything happened, I was to find you. Said you'd know what to do. How long ago? 2 months, maybe 3. I lost time. I stared at the map. Why didn't he run with you? She blinked like she didn't understand the question. Because he had to draw them off. They weren't after me. Not really. I was just noise. And him? She leaned forward, voice low. They want to silence him. Not rescue. Not recover. Silence. I nodded slowly. Do you remember who they were? I asked. Names, logos, anything? She shook her head. No names, no uniforms, just numbers, headsets. They moved like contractors but acted like spooks. Private. Cold. She winced and shifted her weight. I folded the map and slid it into my coat pocket. You're not safe here. I know. Her hand shook a little as she adjusted her sling. Neither are you. I stood, gave her my burner number. If anything happens, call this. Use a landline. No cell. On my way out, I passed a man in a maintenance uniform leaning against the vending machine near the exit. He didn't look at me, but his posture was too relaxed, too still. I clocked the way his eyes flicked toward the hallway after I passed. Outside, the parking lot was empty, but a gray sedan idled 3 spaces down. Same model had been behind me on I-97. I kept walking, didn't speed up, got in my car, started it, then drove 10 miles before pulling off and swapping to my second vehicle behind a storage unit in Laurel. I'd burned this path before. Now I knew for sure Greg was still moving. And time was bleeding out fast. I ditched the second car 2 towns over and took back roads until I hit a busted strip mall outside of York, Pennsylvania. No sign, just a half-dead LED above the garage door that blinked open like it didn't believe itself. I walked in, and the smell hit me first. Old solder, fried plastic, black coffee gone stale. Shop's closed unless you're desperate, a voice called from behind a stack of routers. I'm desperate, I said. Marcus popped his head out. Older now, gray in the beard, glasses smudged. He blinked like he didn't believe what he was seeing. Rebecca Langley. Last I heard, you were busy cleaning house in Richmond. Got promoted to burning it down instead. He grinned. Well, damn. Pull up a crate. Marcus used to be the best cryptographer the NSA never admitted existed. Back in '08, he walked away mid-contract, said he was done feeding the beast. Now he fixed phones and built signal jammers for bikers who didn't like speed traps. I pulled out the torn map Mariana gave me in Greg's old laptop. I need to know if there's movement near this zone, I said, tapping the ridgeline on the paper. And if this machine still talks to anything. He took one look at the laptop and raised an eyebrow. Jesus, this thing's old enough to vote Greg's, I said. He didn't ask how I got it. Instead, he plugged it into a modified tower, started tapping keys, mumbling under his breath. All right, it's pinging dead satellites, but the echo's weird. You see this code loop? This wasn't designed to reach out. It's waiting for a node to activate. Can you trigger it? He cracked his knuckles. Let's find out. 10 minutes later, a ghost node flared to life. Static at first, then a faint pulse. He froze. I leaned in. What is it? He clicked the waveform. It's a relay, buried deep, not official. That's why it's still live. But the signal's bouncing from a cluster south of here. Where? He zoomed in, layered heat maps. The cluster shrank to a single red dot in the middle of a no-fly zone in southern Kentucky. Compound Mira, he said quietly. I've heard whispers. Black Ops detainment. Doesn't exist on paper. Some say it's a testing site. Others say people go in and don't come out. Greg's last GPS ping showed up. 6 days ago. I felt my heart twist. Marcus printed the coordinates, the comms logs, and an anomaly report flagged in his back-end tool. Something about artificial interference and temporal delays. I didn't ask. I trusted him. He handed me the printouts. You sure you want to keep going, Beck? Do I have a choice? He nodded slowly. Once you hit that ridgeline, you won't be able to walk it back. No jurisdiction, no backup, no friends. I'm not looking for friends. You looking for revenge? No. I folded the map, tucked it in my jacket. I'm looking for my husband. He sighed. Then you better move fast. By midnight, I'd sent Katie to stay with my sister in Delaware. Told her it was just for a few days, some school event I needed to help with. She didn't ask many questions. I packed my old field kit, burner phones, signal blockers, hard cash, a locked first aid box, and a loaded Glock I hadn't touched in years. I stood in the garage staring at my car, hands trembling just enough to notice. Greg had warned me, Mariana had warned me, even Marcus in his own way tried to, but I wasn't running anymore. This time, I was going in. I didn't go straight to Compound Mira. Not yet. There was one more name buried in that shipping manifest Greg flagged. Nathan Graves, logistics contractor, internal clearance level 4. His signature was tied to a rerouted load list 3 days before Greg's last transmission, and then he vanished. No paper trail, no forwarding address, no death certificate. But I'd found a hit off an old housing voucher system, someone using his ID to pay rent in cash at a trailer lot outside Charleston, West Virginia. The manager didn't ask questions when I flashed a badge I technically no longer had, just pointed me toward lot 16 and warned, "He's jumpy." "Watch your step," I knocked twice, hand close to my sidearm. The door creaked open an inch. "Who sent you?" a hoarse voice asked. "Greg Langley," I said. Silence, then a chain slid back. Nathan opened the door. Thin, pale, maybe mid-50s, twitchy eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept right in years. "I figured they killed him," he muttered. "Figured I was next." I stepped inside. It smelled like dust, instant noodles, and fear. He pulled the blinds down before sitting across from me at the table, hands shaking as he lit a cigarette. "You worked for Langley Strategies," I said. "I contracted," he snapped. "Never knew the whole thing. They kept us isolated. Need to know. But Greg, he got too close. Asked too many damn questions." "About what?" He looked at me, dead on. "Operation Ridgewell, moving undocumented civilians under the cover of emergency relocation. Except they weren't being relocated. They were being sold off. Private prisons, illegal labor, experiments. Some never even made it off the trucks." My throat clenched. "And my father knew?" "He authorized it. Maybe not every detail, but he signed off on the routing programs. His firm created the clearance masks. Nathan opened a drawer and pulled out a small black USB drive, sealed in plastic. He set it on the table like it burned. "Greg gave me that. Told me if anything happened, to get it to you. Said not to open it. Said you'd know I took it. Didn't speak." He leaned in. "You didn't hear this from me. I was never here." I nodded once and walked out. Back at a motel, I scanned the drive on a secure rig. One file, a voice memo. Greg's voice. "If this reaches you, Beck, then I'm already buried deep. They didn't kill me. Not yet. But they cut me out. No phone. No records. No name. I didn't disappear. I was erased. I felt my lungs tighten. The next morning, I compiled a redacted dossier. Evidence scrubbed, sources protected. I sent one copy to the Office of Government Oversight, another to an encrypted Dropbox tied to the FBI's whistleblower server. I didn't sign either. 2 days later, my credentials were revoked. My state board access went dead. My ID badge got flagged. Official notice, indefinite suspension for breach of classified protocol. Media didn't take long. Former investigator linked to conspiracy theory leak. My name hit headlines. They called me unstable, paranoid, dishonest. I didn't answer a single call. Because now the truth wasn't just bleeding out, it was alive. The courtroom smelled like old wood and stress. Not a criminal trial, not yet. This was a closed federal oversight hearing. Plain walls, sealed doors, no cameras, no press. Just a table, a mic, 6 government officials, 1 international observer, and me. Across the room sat my father, Judge Philip Langley. He wore the same tailored Navy suit he always wore to dismantle people's lives. Not a single wrinkle. Hands folded, face neutral. They gave me 10 minutes. I took 30. I walked them through the files, line by line, laid out on the projection screen. First, a redacted shipping manifest. Second, detainment map overlays. Third, an archived routing contract signed by a private vendor, Langley Strategies. I pointed to the maps. This route, coded as Clear Path, runs through 5 supposedly decommissioned zones across state lines. Off-grid, no jurisdiction. These are not humanitarian centers. These are black sites. An older senator leaned forward. Do you have first-hand confirmation? I didn't blink. I pressed play. Greg's voice filled the room, calm but worn. I didn't disappear. I was erased. I followed the trail. They weren't moving aid. They were moving people. Every time I tried to escalate, someone shut it down. Someone high up. They pulled my badge, closed my case file, and marked me unstable. If you're hearing this, that means I couldn't run fast enough. I let the silence land. Then I added one more file, a contractor schedule showing payment flows into a shell firm. Langley Strategies, $2.7 million, authorized under Emergency Infrastructure Planning, dated 2 weeks before Greg's last known transmission. My hands didn't shake. A woman on the panel said, "You're implying a direct connection to senior oversight. But you haven't named who that is." I turned to my father. He didn't flinch, didn't shift. I stared straight at him. My husband trusted the system. He thought if he reported it, someone would act. He didn't know the man he trusted most was the same one holding the shovel. His jaw twitched. I pointed to the documents. These contracts, this entire operation, started under Judge Philip Langley's jurisdiction. He used his influence to push it through layers of review, shielded it with front firms, and buried whistleblowers under mental health flags. He exhaled, slow and measured, still didn't speak. I kept going. He didn't just know about the network. He helped build the firewall around it, and when Greg got too close, he authorized the cleanup. Silence, no objections, no denials, just power unraveling behind still eyes. A knock at the chamber door broke the tension. An aide stepped in, whispered something to the UN observer seated in the corner. The man stood, opened a leather case, and placed a sealed envelope on the table. "This was delivered to our office 48 hours ago," he said. "It's verified." The panel chair broke the seal, unfolded the document, and stared. She looked up at me. An NGO convoy operating in Western Africa located a detainee at a holding site near the coast. They confirmed identity through biometric scan and dental record. She paused. "Your husband, Agent Gregory Langley, is alive." The room exploded. Chairs scraped back. Phones lit up. Whispered chaos. One man dropped his pen. My father didn't move. Not an inch. But the panel turned. The heat shifted. His name landed in a different tone now. Accusation, not respect. And that was enough. I left the room before they dismissed me. Didn't care. I'd said what needed saying. Greg wasn't just alive. He was proof. Proof they'd lied. Proof they'd buried good people to protect bad ones. As the door clicked shut behind me, I took my first full breath in weeks. The system finally blinked. They brought him back through Germany. Quarantined, debriefed, processed by the UN and every alphabet agency we still had. They didn't tell me where until the last second. Burner call, scrambled location, 1-hour window. I walked into a secured recovery ward at Walter Reed. And there he was, gaunt, pale, still wearing the trauma in his shoulders, but alive. Greg Langley looked up when I stepped in and gave me the same lopsided grin I'd fallen for at Quantico. "I thought you'd take longer," he rasped. I sat beside him, eyes burning. "Yeah, well, you left breadcrumbs." He nodded slowly. "I wasn't sure you'd find them." I took his hand. It felt like bone wrapped in wire. "I wasn't sure either." He coughed, cleared his throat. "How bad is it out there?" "Worse than you thought." His jaw clenched. He pulled a thin file from under the blanket, slid it across the tray. "You were right about Langley Strategies. But it goes beyond that. 5 firms, all tied through third-party lobbying channels. They're using fake humanitarian programs to traffic civilians, mostly refugees, women, children. No passports, no paper trail. I opened the folder. 5 logos. One of them I recognized from the same contractor logs I'd submitted. Greg rubbed his temple. "They used me to build the transport links. I thought it was disaster relief. Until I started seeing the names disappear. No medical records, no evac reports, just gone." "And my father?" He looked at me hard. "He knew." I brought it to him first. Figured if anyone could push it up the ladder, it was him. He told me to stay quiet, said I'd misunderstood the data. Then he forwarded my files to someone in clearance. 2 days later, I walked into an ambush outside Thessaloniki. Friendly fire. That's what they called it. "You were supposed to die." He nodded. But I didn't. I tightened my grip on his hand. "You weren't erased, Greg. You were buried." He smiled faintly. And you dug me out. I stared at him. We're not done. You sure? I testified. Named him. The logs, the maps, your voice memo. It's all on record now. We go public next. He leaned back against the pillows, eyes closed, breathing slow. They won't let it go quiet. I don't expect them to. There was a knock at the door. A nurse stepped in, handed me a sealed envelope. Delivered through the federal liaison, she said. I opened it. Notice of whistleblower status, granted protective provisions, under Federal Oversight Section 12-98, immediate escalation to federal inquiry approved. I folded it carefully, slid it into my jacket. Greg opened his eyes. What was that? Our protection, I said. And the start of something a lot bigger. He let out a breath, half relief, half exhaustion. They'll come after you. Let them try. He laughed, but it cracked halfway out. You always were the dangerous one. I just needed a reason. He looked up at me, serious now. You need to be careful, Beck. These people don't play by rules. They buy silence, with power, with fear, sometimes with bullets. I'm not scared of them. He squeezed my hand, voice low. Then make it count. I stood, kissed the top of his head, and headed for the door. My phone buzzed as I stepped into the hallway, another call coming in, and the wind had already shifted. The call wasn't long. 17 years, no parole, the voice said. Federal custody. He's already been transferred. I hung up without replying. No part of me wanted to see him again. Not in court, not in shackles, not on a prison bus headed to whatever clean cell they gave men like him. He made his choices. Now he could sit with them. The news hit by morning. Former judge sentenced in human trafficking cover-up. It ran nonstop. Headlines, panels, think pieces, photos of him, of me, of Greg, old campaign dinners, family shots, courtroom sketches. I refused every interview. The inboxes filled up anyway. Messages from veterans, survivors, families who'd lost people, and finally understood why. Some were angry, some just said thank you. The medals came next, delivered by courier. Mine said, Federal Distinguished Action. Greg's came in a velvet box with the seal etched in gold. We left them both on the mantel. We didn't go to the ceremony. That night, we sat on the back porch of my house, just us and 2 chipped mugs of tea. Crickets hummed. The wind moved easy through the trees. Greg leaned back in the chair he built the year Katie was born. His eyes were half closed, breath steady. His knee bounced a little, like it always did when he was trying to settle. I reached over, rested my hand on his. He stilled. Then, finally, he closed his eyes and didn't flinch. No twitch, no startle, no half-drawn gasp like someone was still chasing him. He just slept. The sky above us was deep blue fading to black. No spotlights, no applause, just space. I looked toward the horizon and whispered, "Let them keep the medals." I sipped my tea, the wind brushing past my face. We kept the truth.